One thing. They can only agree amongst Republicans and Democrats on one thing. Evidently, they want the Jeffrey Epstein files.
Well, one would hope that if anything could bring American legislators together, even those that don't like each other on a daily basis, it would be tracking down a predator and all of the things he did and to whom he did them. So yes,
Yes, though
go ahead.
he is dead and Americans are still without health care and without, like, so many things that they actually need. But yes, that is true. I think that he was a awful, heinous person, and yet I'm just kind of amazed at this moment that we find ourselves in, Reed, for so many reasons.
Yeah, well, the thing that you and I have going for us is that we both, I'm going to say this, we both worked at the White House in
Yes.
quote unquote regular times. And like I worked there in 2002, like just after 9/11 and just before Iraq. And that would be normal,
Yeah.
right? All things
Yeah.
considered. And obviously you worked for President Obama. And so, yeah, just like the idea of, like Washington, D.C. now seems like I went to school in Austin, Texas. Like the bar I worked at is now the Hilton Hotel. The fraternity house I lived in is now a dorm. It just feels like the White House is the same way. Like if we went back, like half the building's gone. The backyard doesn't look the same, right?
God.
Like maybe you can't go home again.
Well, I know anyone who worked in the East Wing was absolutely devastated. Their offices were all gone. But I was like, what happened to the bunker? Like, so many
Right.
questions about this renovation. I mean, the whole thing. So, yes, you and I both worked in, it's funny because, of course, I was watching the Bush administration from afar. And as a Democrat, I thought couldn't get worse.
Fair enough.
Mm,
Fair
then,
enough.
we have Donald Trump and he's renovating the White House, inviting, Saudi's leader in and excusing him, taking apart a journalist in a consulate. So things have changed.
I know yes, I know. His Eminence the Bone Saw joined Donald Trump in the Oval Office. Um, this was the second time in less than 24 hours that President Trump openly and vigorously, I would say, Johanna, insulted a
Yeah.
female reporter
Yes.
on Air Force One last night. Told one, I believe she was a Bloomberg reporter, to quote, "Be quiet, quiet, piggy."
Yes.
And then an ABC News reporter, he told her today that maybe she was the worst reporter that had ever been reporting. So, look, I think that the problem, well, there's so many problems, Johanna, but like none of that is a surprise, right?
No.
Like none of that is a surprise. I will say the one thing that was, for all of Donald Trump's weirdness, ugliness, awfulness, was last night on the plane when when the Bloomberg reporter asked that question, you could see how angry he actually really was. You
Yeah.
could see a level and a layer of aggression that is, even at his weirdest, right, was surprising even to me. You could tell he was really mad.
Well, and Reed, I think it's only going to get worse because he's now, really the Epstein vote is a sign that he's a lame duck because Republicans that have been long been his allies refused to give up the Epstein vote. Of course, he was the one who was behind saying we needed this release for the longest time. And it is weird. Like, there are some weird names in those files. And certainly when I see names from our administration, I'm like, what the heck? Like, what were they thinking? I never met Jeffrey Epstein, so
Right.
he was not around our orbit much. So, but when I saw that, I thought, okay, so now Donald Trump is going to realize, number one, the House just passed something that was not a priority for him. And number two, they haven't passed a single thing that is a priority for him. And so I think you're going to see, I'm a mom, we're parents. I
Hmm.
think we're going to see temper tantrum, like real, like meltdown of this president because we haven't seen the most stable of leaders in his duration, first
Sure.
and second term. And now I think it's like he can't count on anyone, he feels like. And when that happens, I think he just lashes out.
Well, let's go back to even before this vote, which
Yeah.
again, I think that there were, frankly, if somebody was actually strategizing on this, which it almost seems like, as much as it pained Trump to do this, frankly, it gave. I mean, there was even a story I think in Axios that an unnamed Republican member said this gave me a free pass to
Yeah.
vote for it because what
Mhm.
they did not want to do, and what I was certainly planning on doing, was saying, "Oh, this is the you're the guy who is you're a pedophile protector,"
Yeah.
right? And so that was again, I think the whole thing is hideous and odious and awful, but that made sense. The other part too is like these are sitting at the Department of Justice on Pennsylvania Avenue. Like Donald Trump could order them released anytime he wanted to. Pam Bondi said she was ready to do it. They were sitting in her
She had
drawer, everything else.
binders.
Right. So now
She
we're
had
going to see,
prompts.
yeah, binders and binders. Right. And so now we're going to see that there'll be a national security issue, that, they'll delay. Or, he'll bomb Caracas, right? Anything other than to actually have this stuff come out. You can also see, to your point about there were some Democrats named in those
Yeah.
emails that this will be, he even said in the Oval Office, these people were all Democrats, all Democrats. You can now see, I assume, that the entire right wing conservative MAGA ecosystem will get 100% behind that. They will now have their marching orders. And the thing, as you know, as someone who spent so much time around the media, is they're very good at staying on message, right? If
They
if
are.
if if and when they feel threatened, which I think they probably do right now, they will get back in line in order to protect the hive, which is not something that Democrats are always able to do.
The hive, I like that. It's something that I've been thinking about though, Reed, because when he enters this lame duck moment, there's such a power grab going on. And you and I,
Mhm,
we know one thing about Washington is that everybody wants power. Like that was the
mhm.
thing, little Midwestern girl, Galesburg, Illinois, goes to the White House because a president had talked about no state, no blue state, the United States of America, wanted a better politics, thought we could move beyond like forever wars and things like that. And turns out it's more difficult than that.
Right.
But also, you see that there are good people in Washington, and then there are people who are power hungry. And the
Mhm.
power hungry people continue and continue and continue. Like they have an appetite that's never ending. And so I think, what's interesting is you're going to see all of these people kind of fighting for the mantle of what is MAGA 2.0. And that's what I think will be like, not necessarily, again, the undoing is going to happen. Trump undoes
Mhm.
himself all the time. Like we're in year one and it took us 4
I
years
know.
last
Can you
time.
believe that? It's November friggin' 18th,
No,
right? Like, we're not even a
no.
year into this.
Yeah, I know.
Jesus.
When he won the election, I have people who I love who voted for him. And I wrote them and I said, I hope he brings about what you wanted.
Mm,
And it's interesting because right now we're not in that situation that,
right.
they feel like they are getting what they wanted. Now, they have more patience than certainly I do, but they have patience. They think, oh, again, Galesburg, Illinois, we lost Maytag. So they think the tariffs will bring back manufacturing jobs. When they see him in the Oval Office talking about all of this investment that's coming into America, they are so ready for that investment to come. But it's like, okay, so we're in year one, year two
Mhm.
comes, that doesn't come about. Like already there's this fight over power struggle. That gets worse as we get
Right.
into this next year. And if he doesn't deliver all of these things that they're saying that he's going to deliver, then I think knives absolutely come out amongst each other. And they're already.
Well, I have had a working theory, and I think it's up to now, to your point, been true, which is the only people that MAGA hate more than you and me are each other. That's just the nature of this kind of movement. To your point, they will climb over one another to get ahead. To your point, we saw that Ted Cruz dropped that he's seriously considering 2028. Obviously, Vance is. Rubio's, I'm sure, going to sniff around. And so, like everybody talks about the Democratic field in 2027, 28, it will be crowded. The Republican field will be too. The difference is, of course, is that there's a giant roadblock in the way named Donald Trump, who's not going to want to let that process begin naturally, right? They'll all
Yeah.
be sort of, these ugly nags sort of straining at the starting gate, waiting for him to give a high sign. Just as an aside for Ted Cruz, so I was on the 2000 Bush
I
campaign
wanted
with,
to ask you about Ted Cruz because
yeah. So
it's like I remember when people thought he was a normie, but like, isn't he one of the most power hungry people in Washington?
he is, and a couple of things. One, so I was on the 2000 Bush campaign with him, and
Yeah.
every night after the day's work was done, and whenever that was, someone would be sent into Cruz's office to ask where he was going to go after work, and then the rest of the campaign would go someplace else. Just to give you a sense, like this is like the loathing of for him is not a new phenomenon. Like we're going on more than a quarter century, and he earns every bit of it. Then there was another person who I was talking to when he was, and I don't remember, it was a friend of mine who used to live in Texas. They don't anymore, but he was Secretary of State, which is an appointed position in Texas, I think under Rick Perry.
Okay.
And they went in to visit with him, and they said that even then, that Cruz had laid out exactly how he was going to do it. He was going to be Secretary of State, then he's going to run for the U.S. Senate, he's going to win the U.S. Senate, then he's going to run for president. And so, like, he's always been very laser focused on this, and we should just take a second to understand too that, like, these people, like, when they put their minds to it, right?
Yeah.
If they are willing to put their heads down and just go, more often than not, shockingly, it works. I mean, think about Bill Clinton said he wanted to be president when he met JFK right at the White House in
Yeah.
like 1962, and he ended up being president, right? But
So
that's the thing,
interesting.
is you have to have that will, right? And if there's one thing Cruz has, it's the willingness to be just awful. Now, the thing he's got going against him is that Tucker hates him. He hates
Oh,
Tucker, right? And in the last two, when Tucker was still on Fox, there were a couple of times, especially after the 1 year anniversary of January 6th, where Cruz had called it a riot, and Tucker just took him to the mattress for that. Cruz comes on the next night trying to defend himself, and Tucker's like, Ted, you're a constitutional lawyer. You know how important words are. You can't just say these. And so I think there's real deep enmity there.
mm.
But also to your point, like in today's Republican Party, you're right. Ted Cruz is the normie. He
It's
is
just
the normal one.
amazing.
He is what will pass, you know, uh, Marco Rubio notwithstanding, the establishment today.
Gosh, it is, I mean, truly, like, watching him flee the state when people were in need, I think, like, so much, I actually believe that there are good people who are not out for themselves on the Democratic side, good people who are not out for themselves on the Republican side.
Right.
If all those good people work together, it would be so lovely. And then there are the people who stay in it and stay in it and stay in it and want it. And like him, he's willing to do anything. And I just think, when you're watching somebody like Ted Cruz, I just don't know. I hope that Americans see through it because
Mhm.
he hasn't been there for them. Certainly not even Texans, but I mean, Democrats have tried in Texas time and time again. And
Right.
it's like, it's our wish list. I
Right.
wish I called Beto O'Rourke last time around The Biggest Loser because Beto has so many issues. He had the DUI, he had, issue with his wife's father had used undue influence potentially when he was uh, in a position to do something for him. So there were
Mhm.
like some questions about Beto before. Now we'll see this time around. I think we've got some promising candidates. And, I know President Obama had talked about, I think it's James Tallarico.
Yeah, sure.
And
Member of the
I,
state house. Yeah.
Exactly, and, it was so funny watching him because he's like, "Well, he got my name wrong, but at least he knows who I am," and
Right.
I was like, "I can't tell you how many people got Barack Obama's name wrong." I
Right.
agree, at least he knows. So we'll see what happens, but I just hope the Republicans and Democrats have better options. Like, I wasn't like a huge fan of Nikki Haley, but she seemed like more of the normie kind of, and not normie, but like respects institutions kind
Mm.
of person, of the Republican Party. And I just have no idea what to expect this time around. Also, like, will it be a Trump who's in charge of the RNC, even when Donald Trump leaves? I can predict the DNC, but
Right.
MAGA world is just going to be so interesting.
Well, so and this is why everything is different, which is,
Yeah.
I mean, the Democratic Party has its entrenched mandarins in Washington, D.C., right?
Mhm.
Probably people who've been around for decades, long before President Obama, even
Oh,
probably
for
going
sure.
back before, President Clinton, or at least since President Clinton. The difference here is that the Trumps have taken the RNC as an organization, as an entity, and made it a wholly owned subsidiary.
Yeah.
Not even a subsidiary; they've just subsumed it in to the Trump political operation. In fact, I don't look. I don't know how many people work at 310 First Street Southeast. I really don't. I don't know how much of that is based in Palm Beach and everything else. But to your point, even during a presidential primary process, right, which is supposed to be, neutral or whatever.
Mhm.
Let's talk about, for argument's sake, let's say it's April 2028. We'll fast forward here.
Oh my
Trump
God,
has
I'm ready to fast forward.
aren't
This
we
is
are
all
so right. Trump
I
Trump has Trump has made clear, like, now I'm waving lots of pixie dust here. Trump has decided, okay, I'm not going to run for reelection again.
That's one
But
pixie dust.
to your point, the RNC is a massive cash driver for the
Mm,
Trumps. Every time they send out an email with his name on it, I assume several $100,000 show up,
yeah.
right? He's not going to want that to stop. The other part is he's not going to want to give control to those bank accounts and that ability to frankly launder money, which is what the RNC and the DNC do for presidential candidates. He's not going to want to give that up, right? And so the nominee, whoever it would be, is going to be like, Mr. President, like, I need that, and he's going to be like, well, I don't really care if you win or lose, because he won't, right? He really won't care.
No.
And that's the one thing that you see is he's really treated the Republican Party like a parasite would a host, right?
Mm.
He needs it to survive, but he doesn't care about its life. Does that
Well,
make sense?
and it's so different than what we did. I mean, President Obama, in many ways, he was the outside candidate who won the election because Hillary
Oh,
Clinton
for
was the
sure.
inside candidate. And I remember when we took over the DNC, it was like, oh my God, learning all of the apparatus and how they all work together. But then when we
Right.
went into the White House, there was like Organizing for America, which was supposed to be our outside arm. And then
Right.
there was the DNC. And it was like our lawyers put up this giant, like, concrete wall that was like, you cannot talk to them. And then right before the, next election, we had to have all of these briefings on how we were going to separate everything. And of
Mhm.
course, because I was working on anything that he did, whether it was
Right.
political or official, I had to have different accounts and different, making sure
Right.
that you're keeping everything separate and that you're, respecting the law. That's gone.
Right.
Like, with this administration, it's so interesting because we were talking when we were reconnected about presidential libraries. I had just seen a bunch of people because the Obamas are opening their presidential library. And it's so interesting because President Trump right now is fundraising through lawsuits for his presidential library, like massive amounts of money. And you are allowed to take gifts
Mhm.
without like any accountability for your presidential library. Now, President Obama wasn't thinking about his presidential library until after he was out of office. And here you have Donald Trump, like, literally already planning all of these things, which I would frankly be happy if he would just go work out of the presidential library and give the reins to somebody else. So,
Well, I
like,
mean, this is the point, though. He's never actually going to build a library, right?
I mean,
Or
what will
if
it
he
be?
does, I mean, it'll be just the wing of Mar-a-Lago, and he'll keep the rest of the money, right?
Oh, and
It's
he'll
not.
just like use
You
it
think
to.
about, yeah. So LBJ's is at UT. George H.W. Bush's is at A&M. Let's see, Bush is at SMU. So that's just three Texans just off the top of my head. But
Mhm.
President Kennedy's is at Harvard. Now President Eisenhower's, I think, is out in Abilene, so that's a little bit
Yeah.
different. But for
Yeah.
most of these,
Very
they're
random.
they're very random. Sometimes they're connect to. I mean, he's from there, but other than that, there's
Yeah,
no
yeah, yeah,
university,
yeah.
so
But
it's not unusual.
you have to try to go there for the library.
Yeah, I was actually looking it up on a map. It's not convenient. It's not
No,
even
it's
convenient to
really
like
not.
Topeka,
I
right? Like
know.
it's
Having
you
been
gotta get
born
there.
yeah, been born in Wichita, my family's from Kansas originally, like, definitely a destination you would have to go to for a presidential library. I
Right.
mean, the Obamas really wanted, to bring it back to Chicago, and make sure that it's in a central, like, convening space, and,
Mhm.
as I understand, from everything that they've been investing in, they've been working on next gen leaders, people who are doing like things like prison reform, education reform. A lot of these kinds of big ideas have a place where place and space that people can come meet and convene. It's a little different, as I understand, on the office front. Like the Reagans actually used that beautiful library that's
Right out in the
out
Simi
here in
Valley. Yeah.
California. Yeah, it's a beautiful library, and as I understood, they actually used it as an office. I'm not sure that that's the intention of the Obamas. They'll have the space, but using it for an office is probably less likely.
Well, I would
But
say too. I mean, they're first of all, they're so much younger than the Reagans were,
yeah.
right? And so much more mobile, right? Like that. I doubt that either of them are in one place for more than
No.
24, 48 hours to begin with, right? Whereas
Well,
President Reagan was already pretty well along in various ways. Mrs. Reagan, right? They just weren't going to do the kind of things that the Obamas can or would do.
no, you're right. I was like, in fact, they even joked about now you know what the president has been up to, because I think a lot of us are like, what are you doing right now? I
Yeah.
mean,
Right.
there's
I
been a
know.
lot, but like,
I mean, that's a question is like, I mean, they are in some ways 180 degrees away from the Bushes, right? Which
yeah.
is like George W. went and painted and he does all the other stuff. And he was on Monday Night Football with Eli and Peyton last night, right? Like
Yeah.
it's probably the most public thing he's done in a while.
And
Um,
doesn't
you know,
want to talk politics. And
no,
like,
but he was very clear from the get-go that when he left office, he was leaving it all behind, much to my chagrin in some regards,
yeah.
right? That he was not going to get involved in the day-to-day, fray of American politics. You would see him occasionally make remarks. I think he did something on the Today Show with Jenna about the importance of press independence. I think the library's done a number of things on the importance of immigration. But he was pretty clear that he did not want to get back into this pretty directly. Now, look, you could make an argument that Jeb was running in 15, 16, so he didn't want to do that. But I mean, I don't know that the Obamas could sit still that long, though, right? Like, I'm not sure that that's what they're made of.
Well, and even if they wanted to take the tact of being non-political, and I think Mrs. Obama very much wants to take the tact of being non-political, like all the
Mhm.
time. She hated politics from day one. But even if they wanted to take that tact, there are so many of us who, he is the last next gen leader, which is really sad. But of course, we
Mhm.
had his vice president next. And then Kamala Harris, who, of course, we've had candidates, her and Hillary Clinton, who have lost. So he was really the last next gen leader that a lot of people are looking to for like winning leadership. And there are some people saying, "Oh, turn and like we're not going to, we're going to do the Mamdani route or whatever." But I think, and we are talking on the day of the Epstein files, Ro Khanna is someone who I keep watching. He
Mhm.
is, of course, the one who worked with Thomas Massey on this and has been consistent about this for a very long time. He is an Obama alum. He worked in the Commerce Department.
Mhm.
He has definitely been in touch with the president because we were talking about Galesburg, Illinois, even, and he was talking about how he had talked to the president about Galesburg, and he said, everybody remembers you fondly, but nothing has changed.
Mhm.
And so I think that that also weighs very heavily on knowing the president as I do. Like he cares a lot about long term change. And so those things that weren't reformed, like I think again, the Middle East, like the situation, without a two-state solution, these things weigh very heavily on him because he wonders like, what more could I have done? And so I think it's such an interesting position because he's like young enough to have that energy,
Mhm.
wise enough to not always say exactly what's on his mind. And, people are looking for him to say, okay, help us through this next phase with next gen, hopefully like some ethical
Mm.
leadership, which some of us still very much want.
If I may ask a question, and I don't want you to betray any confidences. Do you how much do you think, or do you think that that President Obama was surprised after he took office in 2009, winning states like Indiana and North Carolina with this overwhelming? I mean, I was in Denver election night, and I mean, I had never seen anything like it. I mean, people were, I mean, it was pandemonium, but
Yeah.
joyful pandemonium, right? No one was angry. I mean, it was just unbelievable. I'd never seen anything like it. Um, do you think he was surprised by when he got to office just how deep that entrenchment among so many people and parts of the bureaucracy and parts of what I would call the system really were, and how, as much as you might want to, they're just things that are, it's easier to move bricks for Pharaoh than it would be to get this stuff done.
Yes, and I think there was a degree of us, maybe being naive
Hmm.
to the fact that we could try to change it. We
Right.
may not have had all the right players in place to change it. I mean, there's a lot of complaints that Republicans have, when I talk about, having come with a, Democrat who believed in no red, no state, no blue state, about
Hmm.
President Obama saying, well, elections have consequences, and some of the statements that he made. And then, of course, we had Patrick Gaspard, who was big union guy, doing a lot of our legislative affairs. There's probably like more bipartisan consensus type makers that we could have brought in to actually bring about healthcare. But then, when we tried to negotiate healthcare, you remember he had said over and over that he wanted to negotiate on C-SPAN. And then it turns out you don't actually negotiate things on C-SPAN. I mean, President Trump tries, which is interesting actually watching him try to use the camera. And he does in many ways, in a way that I'm almost like jealous that he
That he
uses
doesn't
that
care.
bully pulpit.
Yeah,
Well, yeah, like I wish we would have used it a little bit more to talk about healthcare. Like I wish we could have gotten a single payer or at least a public option. And we
sure.
did not. We did not get a public option. We had nothing in the public sector competing with the private sector. We had to go with all Democrats. Ultimately, I think had we gone with Republicans, had we actually negotiated healthcare, I think it would have been better.
Sure,
But,
of course.
you know, so yeah, I look at that. I look at things like education reform, like things that are like really near and dear. I mean, he was a public school dad. Like I'm a
Mhm.
public school mom. Like this stuff matters. And I know, when you look at it, you go, God, they're doing it in such a different way. Not always effective. I mean, he hasn't actually gotten legislation done, Trump. And that's what I think a lot of people in the MAGA world think, oh my God, he's been the most impactful president because he talks all the time. But like he talks all the time and then he leaves office and you can change everything because he has nothing in actual law. That's why like he doesn't even have a plan for healthcare. Like let alone
No,
like
well,
he tried
no.
to repeal Obamacare. He didn't even do that. So
Well,
it's
but he
like
doesn't care. That's the other part. I mean, that's the
I think
fundamental
you're
difference.
right.
He just doesn't care about. I mean, at this point, Trump is an elderly gentleman meeting with his rich friends and focused on home decor. I mean, that's
And a
basically what he
Nobel
is.
Peace Prize, which is
Right. And
why
then,
every
yeah,
single day he has a different global leader. I mean, that's the stuff that doesn't necessarily like translate to Galesburg, Illinois. Yes, everyone there is very concerned about, whether there's going to be war, whether we're competing on a fair plane with China, what is going on with Russia. Like all of these things are legitimate questions that they, have. And
hmm,
yet, I would say the problem is when they see him in the Oval Office with, a Saudi leader, when they've still got high prices and layoffs are at an all-time high, when we see,
Mhm.
like there are plants closing. There was just a report about a Trump supporter closing his business because of tariffs. And so,
Right.
I think when they see those kinds of things, people get frustrated, and my friends at least. And so then it's like, okay, they're open to what's next. But I guess the question is what's next going to be as transformative as they want it to be? Because things are frustrating right now to a
Right.
lot of Americans.
Well, and so let me ask you that question, because this is what concerns me. If we're going to be able to fast forward this horror movie just a little bit, is to your point. I think that what I see, we talked a little bit about this. There, what we see is that there's a Democratic Party that is very much having a little bit of a schizophrenic moment. It doesn't know
Mhm.
what it wants to be. It
Yeah.
doesn't know who it is. Um, but the dynamism that a President Obama brought to the party is really missing right now.
Yeah.
And so I have two questions for you. One is that only the kind of thing that can occur on the back of a presidential nominee? And second, or presidential campaign. And second, do you think that Democratic primary voters, and I know we're a long way off, but we could make this an argument for 2026 also. Are Democratic primary voters going to be okay with the everything is like they're so bad, just vote for us, right? Which could work, right? That's the James Carville theory. Or do they need to go and say, when we retake this office, let's say it's the US House, on day one, we're going to put these things on the floor, and
Yeah.
we're going to vote them, we're going to vote on them, we're going to send them to the Senate. If the Senate kills them, we're going to put them in, we're going to say this is what the Republicans said they will not do for you? Or do you think it's going to be, oh, things could be a little bit better, we just need to nibble around the edges? Because that doesn't seem, at least from my travels, Americans don't seem to be in the nibbling mood.
No, I don't think we're gonna be nibblers. I
Yeah,
think,
I hope
I
not.
think, yeah, I think that Democrats are going to have candidates emerge that are going to be wholesale change agents. So I saw Jonathan Martin, I'm sure our friend, who's covered
We
all
used
of
to, when
us.
he was at Politico and I worked for John McCain, we used to eat at Hard Times Chili in Old Town Alexandria when we were just two lowly 30s somethings.
Yes. Well, he wrote a column saying, just admit it, Gavin Newsom is the front runner for the Democrats. And I'd say there are a lot of us Democrats who are saying, no, 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 no. I mean, he is in the way that he's getting a lot of attention in, pushing
Right.
back on Trump. But if you actually talk to him about ideas and what he wants to do, like, he waffles all the time. I mean, this is a guy where you don't actually know whether he's going to veto legislation, pass legislation. He's a guy who, of course, expanded Medicaid for undocumented immigrants, and then, decided to try to, stand up that, well, that wasn't exactly what he was doing. Yes, he's
Right.
been okay on immigration, but we don't have, the plan for immigration. Like, there's a lot of questions around Gavin, whereas I would say there are big ideas people in our tent who
Hmm.
at least like will be bringing these big ideas to the stage. And I think it'll be harder for him to compete against them with his, peacock feathers than it is to compete against Donald Trump. And we will have, the one thing I know for sure is Democrats will have a robust primary this time around.
Right.
Like they have lost any like desire to anoint the next
Right.
leader. And so we're going to have people from every different walk of life, which may or may not be a good thing because, of course, when you have so many, it's hard.
Right. But primaries are a good thing,
Yes,
especially at the presidential level.
they are.
I mean, I go back to the 2000 campaign. George Bush would not have been the candidate in the general had he not come within a hair's breadth of losing to John McCain. If
Yeah.
McCain had not squashed us in New Hampshire, right?
Yeah.
And Bush had to buckle down and say, I need to be better, and you all to the campaign need to be better too,
Yeah.
right? Then it
Well,
wouldn't have been the same. And I think that that's one thing that I think Democrats are like, no, 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 we need the easiest primary we can get so that no one said anything bad about our person. as if most people like the whole point of being the presumptive nominee is that you get a new lease on life, right?
Yeah.
You get to be washed in the blood of your party and everything else, and then you go and remember that as you've probably worked at as many conventions as I do,
Yeah.
mostly you once upon a time, the convention was where most otherwise normal voters got their first real look at who you were, right?
Right.
And so this idea of like we need to, we can't have this. Like, no, you want a robust argument
I
about
do.
not only the future of the party, but the future of the country. Because if it's just going to be, well, I wish we could go back to 1997, right? Like that's not going to win.
My worry is right now the DNC is debating our process. And there's a lot of people who are frustrated with Iowa because the last time they had the caucus, it was such a disaster. I mean, frankly, like we didn't know who won, and there were a lot of questions about the
Sure.
caucus. And so, they'll blame the DNC for some of the tech stuff. I don't know. But, I think we need a state like Iowa, if not Iowa, which I love
Mhm.
Iowa, but I think we need a state like that that's cheap for
Yeah.
people to compete and
Right.
to compete for like on the ideas stage. And the problem, like I didn't know why Iowa went first when I was a college student at the University of Kansas. But when I worked in Iowa, you see just how seriously those voters really
Right.
take that responsibility. And like it was very different when we went into Idaho, for example, with President Obama. I remember it was like we had won Iowa, we had won uh, at that point South Carolina, and then we went nationwide and we did this rally in Idaho. And I mean, there aren't a ton of Democrats in
No,
Idaho, but there are enough.
13% registration. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and we wanted to beat Hillary Clinton. So, we were going to every state we thought we could beat Hillary Clinton. So, this was one of those states. And I remember they told us you are going to pack this stadium. And it was like, we were like, there's no way.
Mhm.
And so we literally like draped it like in half
Sure.
so that you could, close off the fact that we didn't have the enough
Right.
people. And then not only did we fill the entirety of that, but there was a line around the block because it's more of a star
Yeah, of
type
course.
draw for a lot of states that don't have political leaders a lot. It's like, oh my God, who's this new? Whereas I
Oh yeah,
love
look, and
the skepticism.
you would have gotten them from Oregon, Eastern Washington, Northern Utah, right? Like Boise is
It was
5 hours
amazing.
from a lot of different places in the Mountain West, right? So like people would have been like, hell yeah, like this is
Well,
he ain't coming to Medford, right?
we
So I bet
ended
as well
up
go.
winning Idaho like 80% to Hillary Clinton's like 20%. So it was worthwhile for us.
Right.
So
But that was also the byproduct of a very smart strategy you put in place, which is
mhm.
you all knew from the get-go that this was a delegate fight.
Yes,
This was not
delegates
just a simple
always mattered to us.
right. Delegates, if I got to get 50% plus one of the delegates. That's and then you
Yeah.
guys have the super delegates and all that other stuff, right?
Which is,
But like
supposed to prevent a hijacker from taking over your party, which I think the Republicans in the aftermath of Trump kind of probably wish a little bit. Some of them at least wish that they had. It's like,
yeah,
you
but the
know,
problem is that if they put their finger on the scale, as we've seen that they would, then you get a lot of the base who's like, that's not who I wanted.
yeah.
You
Yeah.
guys wanted
Well,
that person, and I didn't want that.
and that's the
Because
Bernie argument, right?
right,
Like
because the
against
super
super
delegates
delegates.
are established Democrats by
Yeah.
definition, right? Like
Yeah, they are.
they are not Bernie people. They are
No,
people who
they're
are
people who have been longtime Democrats. I
right,
remember we thought they were all going to go for Hillary because she's
right,
been around. And it was like the whole super delegate strategy of like trying to, meet with them and make sure that they knew who President Obama was and could trust
right.
him. And yeah, so I think on the Democratic side, we will have a big full, robust primary. I don't know where it starts. I'm worried about like the DNC actions now. I don't think a lot of people are paying attention to them.
Well, I
Um,
mean, this is going to start about a year from now. So tell us
it
this. I
it
mean,
really will. It really will. And right now, there's this debate over whether, you should allow a state with majority white voters to go so early. So like there's a lot of again hate on Iowa. Here's the thing. I would say the reason why we won Indiana and Ohio and North Carolina and I mean across the nation, Missouri, the
mhm.
reason why we could win those states is because we won Iowa. And so I would make the case over and over like if you can win in a state like that. And I think Michigan is like it but slightly different. There's a conversation going on about Michigan. Obviously, there was a desire to boost them up a little earlier and certainly they've had like job loss. So has Iowa. It's just smaller and cheaper.
Well,
So
but Timmy, this is part, and maybe we're old fashioned. Maybe we're too old for this. But like to your
I
point,
hope not.
if you go,
I mean,
if you
Donald
decide,
Trump should certainly be too
right.
old for it then.
But think about this. Like if it's Michigan, to your earlier point, then the person who's going to have the decided advantage is the person who can buy enough media and enough digital media, right? In Detroit, Grand Rapids, Traverse City, everywhere in between, right? It is a huge state population wise and it is a big state media wise, right?
Yeah,
If
it's
you it will be
expensive.
very yeah, South Carolina is a media market state,
Yes.
right? I mean, you got Charleston, you got Columbia, you got Greenville and Spartanburg, right? You got Charlotte, and down towards what is it? Not Savannah, but Augusta, right? It's right there on the border there in Southwest South Carolina. So like that is, you are basically saying only well-funded candidates can participate, and I
Yeah.
think that is fundamentally, and I mean, I
It's a
understand the point,
flaw. That's the whole
yeah,
thing. Like the
but
the
it's also a
money in
logistical
politics.
test. Can
Yeah.
you get your people to the church on a snowy, freezing
Yeah.
Tuesday night in January?
See, that's why I think there is something to and they're like, "Well, it's disenfranchising to, working people." We had so many working people supporting President Obama. They
Yeah.
did everything they could to get there. And
And it's your job as the campaign to make
to
sure
get
that they
people
can get
there.
there.
Yes, yes. And I mean, it was a little discouraging, I remember on caucus night because of how the delegate math, goes. A lot of times you can have double, triple the number, and as long as they're viable,
Right.
every candidate ends up with one. So, like, there are things, sure, reform the system, but like, this is my whole thing with all of our institutions. Like, I think sometimes we don't know what we've got till it's gone.
Right. Well,
The
and
world we're
again,
living in.
look, if I mean Iowa was a good place again because it was a test of, I mean, this is the other part too. Not just the logistics, but also, and I think you and I were talking about this on the phone the other day, and New Hampshire's this
Yeah.
way too. Iowans and the flinty lovelies of New Hampshire, like they have an expectation that you're going to spend 10 or 15 minutes talking to them
Yes, they do.
individually,
Yes, they
right?
do. Yes, they
And
do.
so they like, and because and I know it sounds weird in 2025, but they see themselves as the people who have a responsibility.
Yeah.
Does this person deserve the right to have the caucus votes go their way? Is this person able to stand up to the crazy guy at the diner on the seashore, right? Who's haranguing him for 20 minutes? And look, want a perfect example? Let's go back to 2024. How awful a campaigner was Ron DeSantis. Like,
Oh
first of all,
my
I knew
God.
I knew before he even got to Iowa, like this guy was
Poor
overbought. But
Ron.
like you looked at him, you're like, people are repelled by him, right? It's like
Yeah.
he's a polarized magnet. They wanted nothing to do with the guy,
See,
right?
that's
Nothing to do with the guy.
That's the question that I have is like there really is no one like even JD Vance, like he's not like I don't know, he's not someone people were storming down to get to like in the same way that Trump and Obama were. Now,
No.
I don't know if we're going to get that, but I'd like to build it within the Democratic Party, and I think we
Sure.
can. I think there are a lot of people who should be those kinds of people. And, I would blame The Apprentice for, I mean, Donald Trump
Right.
had popularity before, but I'd say The Apprentice is why he had more popularity. So it's like, what are we doing now
Mhm.
to fuel candidates who can really, not only bring transformative ideas, but unite the country, like have some sort of semblance of, and I do like, I love this country. Like America, yes. Like
Right.
America first. Sure. Like let's make America great, but let's make it great for everyone and not just Donald Trump's rich
Right.
friends.
Right.
Like ah
Yeah, and
so
I think that the other part is, I remember I'll tell my one Iowa story, and then I'm going to ask you what you're working on, then I'll let you go. Is
yeah.
on caucus night in 2000, Bush had won, um, and he was getting to the airport, and Gore was there too. Gore had won the caucus, and so we're at the Des
Right.
Moines FBO, fixed base operator. For those of you who
Mhm.
haven't spent enough time at them, that's like the private airport, and Air Force Two is sitting there, which I had never seen in person. And Bush gets there, and he's on like a Gulfstream 3 or something, and the press plane is a 737. And they want the 737 to take off first because the Gulfstream is faster. They're headed to New Hampshire. Well, the press plane's tires had frozen to the tarmac, and the chocks were stuck, right? So they couldn't move the press plane. And so Bush is like losing his mind, right? Because here's the other part. If they don't leave within like the next 7 minutes, then Gore's going to arrive. He is the sitting vice president of the United States, and everything shuts down until he's gone. And
Right.
Bush is like, I am not waiting. If the press can't make it, that's their problem, right? So there are guys out there with sledgehammers, right, getting, and finally, they get it loose, and the people are screaming at us in the radio, like, what are we supposed to do? My shoe has already frozen to the tarmac, right? Like I'm walking around like this because literally the heel of my wingtip had frozen to the runway. And finally, like Bush gets out of there. The press plane gets out of there, and right as soon as that happens, like here comes the Secret Service, here comes the motorcade, and everything else. But that's the kind of stuff too that, like, maybe we do it for the stories, Johanna. Like maybe
Yeah.
we do it for the stories. Like
The
was only
stories are good.
right, yeah.
That
And
I can
that's
only
not going to happen in
imagine.
Columbia,
But
right? Like
also
in
read,
Columbia, South
like,
Carolina.
just listening to the days of the press plane. So,
Hmm.
for everyone who doesn't know, like, there used to be a plane full of press. They would charter a plane to fly
Right,
everywhere to cover everything. And the fact now that not only is there none for, any of the trips President Trump is doing, they're flying commercial. There's a totally different makeup of the press pool because the White
right.
House is determining who is on that plane. So, it can be Breitbart instead of,
The AP,
Bloomberg or the AP. The AP,
right?
which is, the Associated Press is the outlet that still has people in every state house. So it's, I'm very concerned about news. In fact, when I
Right.
left the White House in 2015, I was recruited. Austin Butner was out here
Oh, sure.
with
I know
the Los
Austin. Yeah,
Angeles Times.
yeah,
Yeah. And he and Eli Broad had the idea of buying the LA Times and turning it into a
right,
nonprofit, telling the good stories as much as the bad stories, and having a business model that would work behind it. Sadly, so I was working with Austin, he was in house. Eli put in the bid to buy it. And when that happened, they said no. And then there was a little executive fight. They fired Austin. And then they
right.
said, we'd like you to stay and be on the same page that Austin's bad for the organization. It was like, that's not how this
Eh,
is going to
no.
go. So I ended up leaving. I have been on that pursuit for what is fair
Hmm.
in news since then. I have not yet found it, which is one of the reasons I started a Substack, to try to, put my perspective out there and try to connect with like-minded people because, I really think that what investigative journalists do it matters a
For sure.
lot. Like I think they held us to a higher standard and I appreciated hard-hitting reporting in the White House. I was always a fan of the reporters with the hardest questions, and that was not always shared by
Right.
everyone in our team. But I think, finding that is going to succeed in this environment is really important to me. Of course, when I left the LA Times, I ended up working with a business partner for years, and it was great. I was flying back and forth to DC, and so
Oh,
ultimately,
I'm sorry about that.
I know I'm not a DC girl. I've never been. In fact, my eighth grade boyfriend broke up with me on our eighth grade trip to Washington, DC, and I was so devastated. My first trip to Washington was an utter failure. It never got better. Although I do very much love my
Just
husband and
just
he
a
was there
just
with
a
me.
young 8th grade Johanna sitting on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial, sobbing her eyes out.
Crying, crying. It was terrible. So I am definitely not a Washington D.C. person. I'm
No.
definitely still a Midwesterner at heart. Although once I moved out to Los Angeles and I found this fabulous weather, I found my little Des Moines, Iowa of Los Angeles County, and I
Oh,
just
good.
stuck around. So yeah, so I write weekly and then do these Substack lives. Reed, I'm so glad we did this. I'm so grateful for you reaching out.
Oh, no, and I hope we could do it again. And guys, just one thing is, and I think Johanna can agree with me. One of the great, I mean, being an advanced person
Mm.
is an incredible gig. More incredible in your 20s and even
Yes.
your early
Yeah.
30s than in your almost 50s, like I am. But you get to see the entire country
Yeah.
on a campaign, and if you're lucky enough to work at the White House, you get to see the entire world. And to your point about loving America, like I've been to 48 states. I'm missing North Dakota and Kentucky.
Mm.
If anybody has Derby tickets for next year, let me know. I will certainly take you up on them. And I have not had a reason to go to North Dakota yet. But you find that, whether or not it's Iowa or California or Utah, where I live, or New Hampshire, whatever, most Americans are decent people. They
Yeah.
are looking out for themselves and their families and their communities, and they want somebody else to do that too. And I don't think they should ask any less. And I don't think we should offer any less.
No, and I think, like, trying to share our perspectives in the most honest and forthright way is the only way, I feel like I can contribute to that conversation. It was incredible. I mean, traveling again, grew up in Galesburg, Illinois,
Mhm.
Galesburg High School. Our town had one of the highest teen pregnancy rates in the state of Illinois. We had a daycare in our high school. We had lost manufacturing slightly after I graduated from high school. They had left, but
Right.
it was already decreasing when I was there. And then I traveled around the world, like 42 countries with President Obama, more than without. Like, that's the other thing. You do fuel stops, which is like, who knew I would go to Pago Pago? Like, to the
Right.
places I was like, what?
I
So
know.
that was random. But yeah, you fly around the world and it was so incredible because you get to see the world. And I think like you in India, I see people sleeping in their semi trucks, real poverty, burning
Yeah.
tires to stay warm and things like that. And we think often that we have it bad. And I think there's way more that we need to do to fight for a more equal shake, especially means as though Elon Musk is making more than every single school teacher in the
Mhm.
nation in one
Right.
year. Like, that's a problem. So, I think we have to do more to fight for it. But God, how blessed we actually are in this country when you travel the world and you see what we have taken for granted. That's why I find myself so protective of what we do have, even though I believe in massive reform.
Right.
And so, hoping we can find the like minded individuals.
Well, I think we will. All right, Johanna, tell everybody again where your Substack is. If you have any social media you'd like to share, go ahead and do that, and then we
It's
will let you get on with your day.
Johanna Maska, Johanna, Maska is maska.com. So pretty
Awesome.
easy.
All
Thank
right, as
you.
always, gang, find me here at Substack at the home front, and Twitter says.us, Blue Sky, TikTok at Reed Galen, Threads and Instagram at Reed_Galen USA. If you are watching on YouTube, please go ahead and subscribe. Give me a thumbs up. Everybody, thank you so much. Johanna, I hope you'll come back.
Oh, I would love to. There's
All right,
more to discuss.
And next episode is going to be best war story you have. So just think about your best trip
Oh
or
yeah,
worst
we've
trip,
got
and we'll
some
go
war
with that.
stories. Ooh.
All right. Everybody else, thank you so much. I hope you guys have a safe and happy Tuesday evening, and we'll talk to you all soon. Bye-bye.